it's another Confessions podcast. This from your friends at Radio 2, particularly here on Drive Time, where we specialise in such matters. This week's concise collection includes a spectacular sporty scam, some terrible twine tomfoolery, a Ford Fiesta in a Ford fiasco, and a paper pasting palaver. Anyway, who will you forgive? Here it all comes. You're right, there was a lot of shouting there. In my defence, when you're standing in stage in front of 45,000 people, the temptation to go, James Blunt! You did very well.
Can you hear me at the back?
Exactly, yes, just to build up your part just a little bit. Yeah. Anyway, here's a confession. So this comes from Carl. Thank you very much indeed, dear Father Simon, and the all-knowing and all-forgiving collective. My tale is from the fateful year of 2005, when my travelling companion Lisa and I cast aside the hustle and bustle of modern life to seek cultural understanding and to become at one with the many nations of our planet. We set off with nothing more than our backpacks to spend a year travelling the globe, meeting strangers that would soon become our friends. The aim of our travel was to cast off the non-essentials of our traditional ways. However, I do have to say that football is truly a universal language, and whether at the top of Machu Picchu or crossing the Great Wall of China, as soon as anyone discovered we were English, perhaps my football shirts had a few clues, they wanted to talk about the beautiful game, much to the dismay of the lovely Lisa, who had to listen to every discussion, however badly I tried to explain in languages I didn't understand. As the year progressed, it became apparent that a once-in-a-lifetime event was beginning to loom over the horizon, for this was the season that my team, in Carl's words, the heroes of North London, Arsenal, in my words, the new arrivals from South London. It began their long overdue and likely never to happen again quest for Champions League victory. Whilst feigning indifference to the football back home, I sought any chance to catch up with the latest scores and became increasingly worried that my year of self-searching would mean that I would not see my beloved team hold the Champions League trophy aloft. So it came to pass that, in Carl's words, the mighty Gunners did in fact cast aside all challenges to win a historic moment in sporting history by setting up a mouth-watering showdown with Barcelona in May 2006. Fate saw us in Thailand, where thankfully the fanaticism for football continued, thus allowing Lisa and I to book ourselves into a backpacker's haunt in Bangkok called Big Dave's, where a huge TV screen was beaming the gladiatorial encounter to the waiting masses, which actually was 6 lads and me. We were the only people willing to stay up and watch the match. Okay. Now, Big Dave, the owner of the Backpackers Haven, was a polite but not always welcoming host. He clearly saw his paying guests as simple passing trade and never really went out of his way to welcome our enthusiasm. And what came to pass, I do feel, was created in some small way by his lack of hospitality. The 7-hour time difference meant that we were pacing ourselves during the night in anticipation for the game. Big Dave hung around at the start of the night, but was clearly unhappy that his till was not ringing to the sound of our drinking. He then came up with a brilliant money-making scheme. He told us that if we bought 2 more pints before the game started, we could have a free round for every goal scored. Wow. Smiling, he then turned to the 2 ladies who were working behind the bar and explained the free beer per goal rule before leaving for the night. Well, we kept up our end of the bargain and duly all bought 2 more pints and sat back as the game commenced. Now, I won't remind you the events of that famous night, but when Arsenal did strike first blood in the 37th minute, we all erupted in cheers and remembered Dave's promise of free beer. We approached the ladies at the bar and they duly served us with a free replacement. The game continued and the much-anticipated goal fest of the first half slowed to a halt, leaving us looking at empty glasses. And it was this moment that I had a cunning plan. The bar staff were paying little attention to the game, so I put forward a suggestion to my fellow fans. The next time they show the goal replay, why don't we all jump up again, cheering, and then rush to the bar? My fellow travellers agreed, and no sooner than said, Sol Campbell's stunning goal, in Carl's words, was back on the screen, and we whooped with glee, and the ladies behind the bar proffered us with more free beer. What delight! We now had established a supply of beer based entirely on the yells of our table. And so it went on. At half-time, the highlights were shown. Yes, we erupted once again, finding fresh glasses being pushed across the bar. The second half started slowly, and once more our glasses became empty. So this time we resorted to cheering the moment the ball went out of play. And once again our glasses were filled completely for free. When the equaliser did emerge, we duly sought our next round. Only fair that Big Dave keeps his promise. The drinking continued, and so did the cheers for imaginary goals. So even when the dreaded climax of the game, which saw, in Carl's words, Arsenal robbed of Champions League victory. In my words, justice was done. Try not getting your goalkeeper sent off.
Yeah, well,
we continued to celebrate each highlight with the same enthusiasm of the first goal. We finally called it a night when the match coverage ended and the local news came on the screen. So, dear Father Simon of the Spurs, I seek forgiveness not for the plan, which saw Big Dave's earnings depleted on the night, but instead from the following. Firstly, the ladies behind the bar, who would have to explain to Big Dave how a 2-1 football match had led to at least 50 free...
Really?
50... 5-0 free pints being handed out to us. Secondly, from my now wife Lisa for disrupting our soul-searching trip by making sure we had a 500-mile train ride to Bangkok just so that we could get to Big Dave's. And finally, from Arsenal Football Club for the disloyalty of being taken away with the moment and enjoying the night for free-flowing beer rather than sitting mournfully in the corner drowning my sorrows as all the rest of them would have been doing. Well, I thought it was quite a cheerful match, actually. But anyway, it was a scam, it was a plot, it was a scheme. 50 free pints of beer. Moral outrage.
The thing is, they may have shot themselves in the foot because they won't be able to stay at Big Dave's again, ever, will they? I mean, they probably don't care. No. But I'm amazed the bar staff didn't check. I mean, 50 free pints?
I have to say, in the original of this, which Carl, names have been changed, there's quite a lot of extra information about the ladies behind the bar, which we thought unwise to
Does that have any bearing on their gullibility, though?
Not at all.
No. They were very gullible.
Well,
whichever way you look at it, they were pretty gullible.
Yeah.
And I think it's really the bar staff's fault. So I'm going to forgive Carl.
Excellent news. What do you say, then, Dean of Deadliness?
Well, I think I agree, actually, with Rebecca. I'd love to tell you how many times Matt's eyes have rolled during the course of that story from the very start. The ladies were idiots in the end, weren't they? Let's face it.
Well, they clearly hadn't worked out what was a goal and what wasn't.
No. And then wife Lisa, well, she had a good night out. She had some drinks, didn't she? What's the matter with her? And also, Arsenal, they probably couldn't care less, to be honest. Small time, really. Just a couple of supporters in the Far East. So, forgiven. Yeah, absolutely forgiven.
OK, well, let's see, with his eyes still a-rolling.
Still a-rolling. There's still a rolling here.
Now, I should confess at this point that I was at that game and...
drinking?
No, I wasn't drinking at all because I was working. And but it was absolutely chucking it down. It was in Paris. It was 2006. And Arsenal obviously went 1-0 up and then got their keeper sent off and ended up losing 2-1 to Barcelona.
It's a long story.
It is a very long story. But I think what I'd say is that I think... my brother's not going to thank me for this, but
here we go. Go on.
He made that mistake once of watching a match and the team we were following had scored and went out the room and came back and they've scored again! They've scored again! And it's him again. He scored it and he scored with a header as well. And me having to point out it's the same goal. It's just they're showing it. Do you not notice that it's in slow motion? Come on. So I'm going to say, maybe the ladies behind the bar didn't spot it either, but then not everyone would have spotted it.
They weren't watching the telly, were they?
No, maybe they were watching something.
They were too busy serving a beer.
Into that. So, yes, I'm going to forgive.
This is Radio 2, and welcome to another Drive Time Confession. Tonight called I Fought the Door. And it's from Terence. Thank you very much indeed, Terence. Your confession's welcome, of course. confessions@bbc.co.uk. And this one sparks from our Edinburgh week. You can catch up on that, by the way, Rebecca, as you weren't there.
Thank you.
OK. Dear Father Simon and the Forgiving Few, following on from Tim Vine's Edinburgh confession, I too would like to own up to a schoolboy misdemeanour where somebody else took the rap for my crime. My confession dates back to April 1982, when I was a hard-working fifth former, or Year 11 in modern parlance, at an all-boys grammar school located in the heavy woolen district of West Yorkshire. I was a conscientious student, rarely in trouble, but not averse to making a little mischief on the quiet. Very early on in my school career, I had realised there was a golden opportunity for an enterprising pupil to make a name for himself. The staff room was situated on the first floor of the school. The staff room was situated on the first floor of the school, opposite an ornate wrought iron handrail at the top of a flight of stairs. As the staff room door opened inwards, all was required was to tie one end of a piece of string to the doorknob and the other end to the railings, and voila, the teachers would be trapped within. It's the Fast Street Kids, they rule. Obviously irresponsible behaviour. Don't try this at school. For years I waited for some daring boy to do the deed and ensure his name would go down in the annals of the school's history. I waited in vain. Eventually I realised that if the deed was to be done, I would have to do it. I decided to act on April the 1st. That way I figured that if I was caught, I could plead extenuating circumstances and possibly receive a lighter sentence. Remember, those were the days of... good old days, I have to say, of corporal punishment, says Terence, and visits to the headmaster or his deputy was for a dose of the stick, were an accepted aspect of school life. Happy days, says Terence. An added bonus was that the school play was running that week, and I knew that there was some useful twine lying around backstage that I could borrow for my dastardly purposes. When the bell for mid-morning break rang that fateful April Fool's Day, I gathered a couple of friends to act as lookout, liberated a length of twine from the stage wings where it didn't appear to be doing anything useful, and made my way upstairs to the staff room. Everything was quiet. The teachers were all relaxing in their lair, doubtless enjoying a well-earned coffee, or perhaps something stronger, after double chemistry with Form 3B. A quick thumbs up from my wingmen confirmed the all clear. Then came 10 seconds or so of frantic knotting, and I had locked the staff room. Breathing huge sighs of relief, we leant against the handrail, nonchalantly, and awaited developments. Before long, word had spread, and a fair number of 5th and 6th formers had joined us. We didn't have long to wait. The staff room door knob was twisted from within. The door opened about half an inch, but further movement was impossible. It was stopped by the twine. My scheme had worked, and a huge cheer went up from all the boys present. The teachers were nothing if not resourceful. The door opened a fraction again, and a ruler appeared, poked out through the gap, and attempted to dislodge the twine. Again and again the ruler tried, each attempt thwarted by my sturdy knots. Further huge guffaws echoed around the corridor at each pathetic failed attempt to escape from the staff room. A teacher then appeared in our midst. What had made him so late in returning to the sanctuary of the staff room I couldn't say. However, he took one look at the situation, gave a broad grin, turned on his heels, and left, to huge cheers from everybody. Now, by this time, the corridor was definitely a little on the rowdy side, especially one particular pupil, let's call him Gobby. He was standing by the door, taunting the teachers within and pointing at them, and giving the general impression that the prank was of his own doing. Eventually, just before lessons were due to resume, a second teacher, a sour-faced grouch known as the Ferret, came along, untied the twine and entered the staff room. Groaning, we headed back to our classrooms. Unfortunately for Gobby, a long arm then reached out and grabbed him by the collar and hauled him into the smoky recesses of the staff room in order that he could be awarded a Saturday morning detention for his troubles, the worst kind of punishment that there was. As a postscript to my tale, I later learnt from the young music teacher with the unfortunate haircut, who gloried in the nickname of Tufty Bumfluff, that whilst... we had to get that approved, by the way. Anyway. That whilst incarcerated, one teacher had tried to summon help from the knocker, the deputy head, via the internal phone. Yeah, I know what day it is, and if you think I'm falling for that feeble April Fool's trick, you must think I was born yesterday, was the gist of Knocker's reply from his ground floor office. Everyone appears to have a jolly exciting nickname, I have to say. Do, yeah. But none more exciting than Tufty Bumfluff. I just wanted to say it again. We've gone through all the length of having it approved.
I might as well. Again. Brilliant, yeah.
And you'll probably mention it in a moment. Yeah. And so, Father Simon, I sit back, we're not quite finished. I seek forgiveness, not from the teachers for locking them in their staff room. Quite frankly, it was one of the proudest moments of my school career. Not from Gobby for his detention. He deserved it for being a show-off and a prat. Not from Knocker for having his peaceful mid-morning snooze disturbed. Into each life a little rain must fall. But from the school play stage manager, who was slightly inconvenienced by the loss of a piece of twine, which in the confusion following Gobby's detention, I forgot to replace, causing the scenery backdrop of a desert island to collapse in the middle of the last performance, falling and then bouncing off the hero's head. Laughs all round, eh? Well, there you go. It's a fine, fine story, and Terence is confessing, but it's Gobby who took the rap, despite the fact that it was Terence who did, in fact, fight the door, and the door won in the end. Sister Rebecca.
I can't actually say that word, Tufty thingamy.
Tufty Bumfluff.
So I'm not going to.
Why can't you say
I just don't know.
Your children would love it.
I'm sure they would. That's probably why I'm not going to say it. I love a good prank, and I think this one was particularly effective. And the fact that it was on April Fool's Day was even better. I don't feel sorry for Gobby, because he shouldn't have shown off and pretended it was him. But I'm trying to think about the twine going missing. Is that such a crime? Surely the stage manager should have just checked it before the scenery fell. Before the scenery fell, exactly. So I think think if that's all he's wanting forgiveness for, I think that the rest of it is so good that you don't even need forgiveness. So you are forgiven.
But when
Terence.
you were head girl, you would have frowned on this kind of activity.
Would I?
I think so.
I think that's a bit of an assumption.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, you were kind of, felt
really
good having
not.
you as head girl if you were up to no good. That's what I think. Anyway, Brother Matthew.
Well, we love this story, if for the nicknames alone of Gobby Knocker and Tufty Bumfluff. Let's say it again, why not? But it's clearly this story had everything that we normally get in school confessions. You've got, number one, you've got April Fool. Number two, you've got silly nicknames. Number three, there's always a school play. There appears to be a school play in just about all of our confessions. And it also appears to be a massive twine shortage in wherever it was in West Yorkshire, which I don't quite understand.
The heavy woolen district.
Indeed,
is all I
yes.
have.
Yeah, well, you'd have thought there'd be plenty of twine. So, for that reason, I am going to forgive Terence. I don't know why.
I'm trying to work out why a countdown would disappear. And is that a good thing if a countdown disappears? Is that a scary thing if a countdown disappears? What do you think?
Well, it depends what's going to happen at the end of the countdown.
Well,
really, isn't it?
what is going to happen when it disappears? But if it disappears, who cares what happens at the end of the countdown? If it disappears, I don't bother.
Wow, this has gone down a very existential route.
Yes, man.
You win money if it...
There you go. It's the voice
There
of
you
the
go.
balls, everybody.
Yeah,
That's
win
what
money.
Who cares about the countdown? It's the balls that matter.
You win money.
Anyway, here's tonight's Right Eye Confession. Here it is. It's from Henry. Thank you, Henry.
Henry, good evening, Henry.
Dear Father Simon and the Carefree Collective.
Yes.
My confession is about an incident which happened 30 years ago when I was a naive 18-year-old just finished with school and passing the time until I attended a local technical college while still living at home with my parents in Newquay on the North Cornwall coast.
Lovely.
Living in Newquay in the early 80s meant endless summers hanging out on the beach or congregating in the town centre with school friends. But I'd finally reached the age where a friend or two had access to a car. And since I didn't have the wherewithal to learn to drive myself, I eagerly hung around with a few of the friends who had. One such friend, Chesney, had a...
No.
What?
Really?
What?
Yeah.
Had a well-to-do family with a large business in the town and a father who enjoyed owning nice cars. Well, if it's that Chesney, he's the lead singer of the Tremolos, but I suspect it must be another Chesney. The summer of 1983 saw him finally downsize to the relatively new idea of the hot hatch. And he purchased a new Ford Fiesta GT in burnished silver with alloy wheels, go faster pinstriping and a vinyl roof. It was big in 1983. Obviously, the thought of allowing his teenage son to take the new beast out of the public road with his mates was something that he refused to entertain. But Chesney was the golden boy, and after a month of pleading and cajoling, he finally relented. And so it was that after what seemed like a couple of hours of instruction and demonstration from the old man about the careful use and preservation of his new car, we drove very sedately out of the estate one bright morning on the pretence of visiting friends in a nearby village, all the while keeping the revs well under 2,000, whilst we felt we were still within earshot of the parent. I probably don't need to tell you that once out onto the open road, Chesney opened the new car up and thrashed it around the local villages and lanes in a way which makes me still feel quite queasy just thinking about it. We didn't break the speed limits, you understand. Just spent most of the morning finding the limits of adhesion on the Fiesta's tyres against the gravelly Cornish tarmac. Anyway, after a couple of hours practising his handbrake turns on the old airfield, we decided to call it a day and head home cross-country. This decision wasn't the brightest as, even though we were both locals, we had no idea which way to go. We headed down the nearest lane and shot along the winding road in the general direction of home. After a few short miles, the road widened into a ford across a small river, which looked crystal clear and would probably have been excellent at getting all the road dust off the car's shiny new paintwork if Chesney and I had the first clue how to actually drive a vehicle safely through deep water. We drove into the ford, I have to tell you, at completely the wrong angle. Chesney fumbled the pedals and the car stalled midway across. Now, I've been through a few Fords since, Father Simon, and most have only had enough water in them to cover my ankles. But this one, thanks to a recently ended dry spell, was quite a fast flow, and water was piling up against the side of the car. There was a fair amount of swearing going on in the seat next to me. I looked down and noticed that the carpet was changing colour as water was finding its way through the drain and vent holes in the body. Chesney began to panic, and in his dulcet Cornish tones, oh no,
Yeah, come on, you can do this.
Here it comes.
he shouted, We've got to push it out. Get out and push.
Oh, it's Stock Martin all over again, isn't it? It's marvellous.
They were stage instructions in my defence.
Of course.
Under normal circumstances, and with the benefit of an extra 30 years, I would have replied along the lines of, and I'm from Kent, by the way, it's your fault, you get out and push. But without thinking, I pushed the passenger door open and gasped as the freezing cold water rushed in and soaked me. Quite a lot of swearing then ensued from my side of the car, too. Since we were both now soaked, we climbed out and closed the upstream door. Heaving on the little hot hatch and twice losing my footing and disappearing beneath the waves, we eventually managed to roll the car up the other side of the Ford. Thankfully, the Fiesta is a light car, or it might have remained in the river all night. And then we just had to set to work drying it out and frantically cleaning it. We told Chesney's father that we were delayed in our return that evening because we were catching up with old mates. But we were really letting the car's carpets and upholstery dry out in the afternoon sun, whilst Chesney walked in circles muttering, "Oh, good heavens, he's going to kill me," over and over again. We still needed further help. And do you have any idea how long it takes to dry a car with the use of a small portable hairdryer? Well, it's a long time, let me tell you. Luckily, Chesney's father never seemed to realise the car had been soaked and nothing was ever said. Although he didn't keep the car for very long, surprisingly. It seems the new vehicle was a bit of a rogue and had constant electrical problems, as well as earlier than normal rust problems in the floor pan. He replaced it at a great loss a couple of summers later with a Volvo. Father Simon, forgiveness, please. Not from my friend, it was his fault after all, but from my friend's father for not telling him that we dropped his new car into a river and then left it to rust rather than getting it professionally checked. Well, it's Henry's story. Henry and Chesney out there, you don't want to trust them with a hot hatch. What do you say?
Why would you
Rebecca?
drive a car through a Ford?
A Ford. It wasn't through a fjord. That would have been
Ford. It's a Ford going through a Ford, though, isn't it?
It's a
very
slightly
confusing.
yes. It's a Ford Fiesta
But
going through a Ford.
Why would you do that? I mean, that is really quite
To make a
stupid.
splash, probably.
Yeah, I think really. I mean, Chesney doesn't sound very bright. It wasn't Henry's fault. It was Chesney. He was in charge of his dad's car, his dad's pride and joy. So I think Chesney's completely to blame, and Henry, you're forgiven.
The Dean of Deadliness.
Yes, I agree with that. I think you're absolutely right.
Can you speak up a bit? Your microphone technique is lost.
Oh, is
something.
it? Hello there,
That's
everybody. Is that slightly better? Yeah. Yes, I forgive Henry as well. It was Chesney, idiot, trying to get across that Ford. So yes, forgiven, totally forgiven.
Well, that was nicely considered. Worth waiting for, I think. What do you have, Brother
Well,
Matt?
I know it's our common policy to always change names of people who do these confessions. Yes, we change names, and clearly that's the only good bit of news for Henry and Chesney, because they're obviously very thick. Number one, what are you doing driving? When did it become okay to drive through the river to clean your car? How is that all right? And then we're in a river and it's very high. I know what I'll do. I'll open the door. No, not very bright. Henry and Chesney.
Well, what would you have done?
I would have, well, number one, probably not driven in the river, but then number two, actually, I would have opened the door and left Chesney in the car. It's your own fault for driving into the river, Chesney. I'm off. You and your silly name and your flash car, and we're no longer friends, you and I, Chesney. No, that's it.
That's you all
Because
over,
you're
isn't it?
thick for driving into a river. Yes.
Wonderful extemporising there. And Nige is on his phone. Put the phone away, please.
So, it was just about it was letting you know what we're doing with Dishwise.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, no, I'm listening. I can multitask.
Excellent. No, so proper beans on toast on the way. However, we do have a confession from Max. Thank you very much indeed. You can download the Confessions podcast tomorrow, by the way. And you can send in yours confessions at bbc.co.uk. Father Simon and the sympathetic few, I have debated long and hard about confessing my sins. Having finally plucked up the courage to put finger to keyboard, I'm hopeful my guilt can be assuaged. The year is 1989, and as a happy-go-lucky 13-year-old, I decided to supplement my £2 a week pocket money with a weekly paper round. There were 3 free papers delivered locally at this time, and the rounds were hotly contested between cash-strapped kids such as myself. Every Friday, a man in a battered Blue Sierra estate would drop, which is clearly not relevant to the story, but it's just a nice piece of detail, would drop off 374 copies of the paper, bound in bundles with plastic strapping at my house, as well as the wages for the week, a princely sum of £3.74, which your studious listeners will have noticed was one shiny Queen's penny per paper. On Saturday morning, I would cut the bindings on my stacks of local news, adverts, reports of the local baseball team's exploits, that kind of thing, then pack as many into my bright yellow waterproof bag as I could carry and stagger off into the crisp air for the short walk to my allotted streets. I would brave snappy letterboxes, rose bushes, paving stones that shot water up your trouser leg, slugs, snails and dogs attacking the newly delivered papers until, after delivering the final one, I would return, restock and repeat until every last one was gone. The whole process would take 3.5 hours, and I'd return in time for St and Greavesy on the telly, then lunch, and then meet my friends in the park for a well-earned game of football. One Friday in school, my friends and I were all arranging to meet in town on the Saturday morning to see the film Batman before our usual afternoon football. I really wanted to see this film, but had 374 papers sitting in my porch that had to be delivered, with Saturday the only possible day I could deliver them. So it was either miss the film or drastically reduce my delivery time. The answer lay in the computer game Paperboy. I spent an hour of Friday night rolling newspapers and then filling my paper bag. I was able to cram in more than normal. I was already ahead. On Saturday morning, waking an hour earlier, I wheeled my bike into the slow drizzle and set off. Riding slowly, I would pick out a paper and hurl it at the front door before repeating on the next, and so on. Boy, this was a great idea. I finished my round in a record hour and a bit, rode quickly home, and met my friends en route to Gotham City. Returning after watching the best film of my life, ever, I stopped in my house to pick up my football boots and made my way to the park. As I turned the corner, I learned 3 things. 1. I now know that American paperboys secure their rolled-up papers with an elastic band. 2. The wind had picked up, and every single newspaper, which had not been found by the householders, which I now accept was all of them, were now spread all across the 4 streets and beyond. Litter everywhere. Number 3, the drizzle of the morning had become a whole lot heavier and had turned the neighbourhood into a papier-mâché-covered Blue Peter Tracy Island. It was absolutely everywhere. Sheets sticking to walls, cars, windows, anywhere else that the wind had blown them, and stuck fast when the rain arrived. I did what any 13-year-old would have done, which is put my head down, and I went to play football, only to be back minutes later with my friends to view my handiwork. Amazingly, I was never brought to task over this, and the papers continued to be delivered to my house every single Friday. But I was terrified that the homeowners would be on the lookout for the boy who discharged a paper atom bomb in their street. So I hid all of them, all the newspapers, behind I hid all of them behind an electricity substation, where they lay in rotting piles for many years, until, in fact, very recently, when I went to clear them up as penance for my sins, because I knew I was going to write you this story. I also worked out my ill-gotten gains and donated a princely sum to children in need. So I think I've covered everything. This is a challenge, actually.
Yeah.
Forgive this guy. I think you better.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is quite an interesting idea. Work out whether you've benefited from your confession, and then send us, like a penance, donate money to charity.
Or just send us the money.
No.
Surely, yeah?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a Radio 2 hair shirt would be very good. Yeah, we'll send it off to them. Wear
Anyway,
that.
I'm begging forgiveness, says Max, from the people in the news-printed streets that had to scrape mushy paper off their cars, windows and walls and flower beds. From the ambitious journalists whose hard work went unseen, and the future would-be paperboys because the round was cancelled due to lack of interest from the area. Because no one was taking any notice. Why? Because the free paper was behind an electricity substation, which is actually a very easy thing to say when you get round to it.
Yeah, Rebecca and I are slightly confused.
I'm a bit
aren't we?
confused here because so did he basically he messed up one paper round because he threw them at the front doors and they blew everywhere, and then he started hiding them behind the electricity.
No.
Is that right? No.
I think what happened was he picked them all up and hid them behind the substation.
Okay, so it was just one round.
It's very straight.
No, what happened was...
It's like dealing with kids.
Let's leave it to Teach. Teach, please tell us what happened.
He watches Paperboy, like the computer game, so he's chucking all the papers everywhere. 374 papers over many streets.
No, we get all that.
They're blown everywhere.
Yeah, we're with you there.
It's turned to papier-mâché.
Yeah.
He was so scared of what everyone else was going to think when they see the Paperboy coming again, that instead of ever delivering another newspaper again, he hid them behind an electricity substation.
I got it right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I just
Does that
thought
help?
that. Yes, it does. I thought first of all that was how you were supposed to deliver papers. I just always thought people threw them in the driveway. That's what they do in the States. I grew up in the States. That's what I think.
Well, that just shows what a slack upbringing you've had.
How ignorant I am.
You know, you actually have to get off your bike. You walk up the path.
Put it through the.
You put it through the
postbox.
letterbox.
Okay.
What a
In that case, he was obviously, trying to cut corners. He knew it was wrong, and he really shouldn't have hidden them after that.
In the
he should have just given his notice in or said, I don't want to do it anymore.
But he gets £3.74 a week.
Well, that is sorry. Even though he's given the money to charity, Max, unforgivable.
It's a penny a paper. Let's see what Novice Nines makes of it.
Yeah, to the max, because initially, like similar Rebecca, thinking, well, that was just one off, that was it. But when it dawned on me massively that after that I thought, Bubble Street, I'm never going to deliver another one. Well, you lazy tyke. I mean, that's not innovation, that's just theft. So,
No,
Max,
it's not.
it is, he's taken the money, but not done the job.
Oh, yeah, he did do that.
So that is theft. So,
but then he worked out how much he owed society.
Yeah.
Oh, Bubble Stream, that's his clearing his conscience. I'm going to send him the BBC to Radio 2 flagellating hair shirt, because that's what he deserves to wear for some time. Not forgiven, Maxi.
Oh, is that a thing now? We've got one of these flagellating hair shirts.
I'm just going to make it.
Oh,
Let's
lovely.
start knitting now, and it's going to be nasty.
Indeed. So, Satan Greavesy, Batman, and Paperboy, the video game. It's like living in the 80s,
That's
isn't
what
it?
it was.
You've got
It was
to love it.
1989.
You've got to admire the fact that he's left these things behind the electricity substation for 20 years and thinks, but I've cleaned them up now, so that makes it all right.
But he did that because
Really?
he was going to send in this
Yeah,
confession.
like thinking we were going to go, oh, right, yeah, oh, but now you've cleared them up after 20 years. No, you're obviously not forgiven. However, just for reminding us about the 80s and Batman and Satan Greavesy, I am going to forgive, just for that.
Oh,
What a
perverse.
pushover.
Yes, absolutely, well done.
They were this week's confessions. Let us know yours. Come on, it's working its way to the front of your brain. Just allow yourself some time. Send it to us, confessions@bbc.co.uk. It's very, very straightforward. And a whole new podcast available in a week's time. And the Weekly Mayo is available now and every Thursday. Thank you.